I'm just going to read what I have here on the screen. You can just read it below in the description and not listen to the video or watch it. 26-year-old National Bureau of Standards ionosphere physicist Carl Robert Disch, I think that's how his name is pronounced, had walked the 7,000 foot or 2.1 kilometer handline-led pathway from the Longwire and or radio noise building south to the Byrd Antarctic Station around 25 times in the 3 months he had been there since he arrived February of 1965. On May 8th, 1965, in the morning, he radioed forward that he was going on his 26th trip. About 9:15 a.m., he left, going south from the radio box, the radio noise building, going south. And again, that's 7,000 feet. It's over a mile, and he's being led by a handline that is used to make it to where you don't get lost. He was noticed as missing by 10 a.m., and by 11:30 a.m., they found footprints leading south from the radio building, but it drifted west towards a area 4 miles out that would be the runway or skiway, and at the time they didn't know why he did that. Also, technically, he had only communicated with a person over the radio, and this is actually a spurious report that may not even be real. Now, at the time this was going on, the temperature and the wind speed and everything were really, really terrible. It was 40 below zero Fahrenheit or Celsius. It was, the speed of the wind varied up to 50 miles an hour. It was a blizzard, and it's May. Now, if you're not aware of it, in the southern hemisphere, that means it's the cold time of the year. That's the winter time, even though it's, July or whatever, it doesn't matter. The sun is tilted away from it, or we are tilted away from it if you're in the south. 6 days later, after 13 miles of searching length with the estimated under 200 people that could help at the location, the search was called off. By the 14th of the month, memorial services were held in his Monroe, Wisconsin hometown and in Antarctica. Much later, it was claimed by people on various places on the internet later on, and obviously in books, that McMurdo Station received an AA2 Weather Circuit message several times, or just once, depending on the story you're listening to, that claimed to be from him, but they were relayed from a foreign Antarctic station, and this is all claimed to happen in 1971 or so. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up in such a vague way, obviously pointing out that I don't believe that those were real reports, is it isn't a claim that anybody heard his voice. It's a claim that somehow a message was sent. Now, depending on where you look it up, it's going to say that someone recorded him transmitting on a radio. But the actual reports that you see, if you look at the oldest ones, were that people were resending a message that they heard, because that's a very common thing to do at the time. This is mid-60s. This is, towards 1971. This is Antarctica. You're using long and shortwave, and you're tasked as a radio person to repeat messages verbatim. Whether you believe them or not, it's not relevant. As a radio operator, you have to repeat station data. And the person or persons identified themselves as being one or another person. And many of the reports indicate that it was a location that wouldn't have been manned at all. It was the wrong language. You get the idea. But it wasn't his voice necessarily, and it may have been anything from Morse code, teletype, to actual statements verbally. Depending on where you're looking up the story, it gets really muddy. Everything from here up is also kind of muddy, but it's not that far off. Now, this is 1965, so by now he would be very, very old if he was still alive. I'm presuming at this point that he would be dead. He's presumed dead because this kind of thing happens with a ridiculous amount of regularity, not necessarily in the South Pole, but anywhere that you have blizzard conditions where you have to have handlines or guidelines or guidelines. This is an image from around that time, not necessarily directly what we're talking about, but it shows the environment that you would be in. If you're not aware of it, this is a bunch of equipment put on top of the snow, just floating in the snow. It's kind of like being in a boat. And then down here is a tunnel that would lead into the Byrd Station location, and it was being crushed by the snow. These kind of conditions are not conducive to people surviving at all. It's amazing anybody does this. And I know of, personally, 3 or 4 people who've been to Antarctica. Like, one's a relative. And I can tell you from a few of them, they've all said the same thing. Everyone tells you the same thing. You sign up for the minimum period of time to where you're there for one cycle where you're there, and then the first opportunity you leave so you don't feel completely trapped. Some people cannot take it. Some people put up with it easily. Some people enjoy it. But on your first trip, you're advised always to promise yourself and state categorically you will leave on the next path out. That way, if you want to, you leave. Because that way you don't feel trapped. Stir craziness can be a problem. And this is an example of the kind of arrangement he was in. That ladder leads down into the snow that keeps piling up so you can get into this Quonset hut. They have to build them like this. This here is so that they can get air in and out. This is a 7,000 foot approximately radius circle around the location he was headed towards. He would have been technically, let's say, right here. Now this is 7,000 feet. That's over a mile, 2-point-something kilometers, and he was supposed to follow a line doing this way. Now you might have noticed this picture I picked, which is from 2008 or something like that, from Google Earth, shows a line going this way. It's really pervasive. In fact, when you look at this sort of thing, you find out that the snow always seems to blow a certain way during certain times of the year. He was, let's say here, he would have been blown off track this way. And if he kept getting lost, he would have kept wandering. And if you're not aware of it, the standard that's used now is everybody carries 2 or more radios with backup batteries, so if they get lost, it also does something important. It can be a radio range and direction finder so that they can be retrieved, because this shit happens all the damn time. These days, they're just used to the thing being able to happen, so they do a couple of things. Number one, a station like this will have a fueled-up vehicle that can travel 5 times the distance a person can walk in 12 hours, because people will walk in circles. Number one. Number two, they carry a pinger on them or a radio. Next one is lately, they carry an auto-triggered one where if it gets beyond a certain distance, it immediately calls for help, and they just go and retrieve you, and to hell with whatever you're trying to do, they throw you bodily onto the vehicle and drive you back. The idea is to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen anymore. Initially, they went up looking for him. I do believe it was north they went, and they found at the little station, which you can't see here, there's no sign of it anymore, at least not on any maps I can see here. They went north towards him and found his footprints heading generally south and then drifting with or against the wind. One of the problems is you have to realize that if the wind's going 50 miles an hour, you're going to tend to lean into it or go with it. If you go with it, you can go a longer distance, but you will not be going in the direction you want to go. And if you're not aware of it, at the South Pole, a compass isn't going to do you any damn good. This is before GPS and all of the other methods. So what they did is they had a rope or cord set that's over a mile long. Okay, is this a mysterious disappearance? The answer is no. Period. It is just not a mysterious disappearance. Next. This is the conclusion from Washington through Washington's UPI, Universal Press International or something like that. And it just basically says most of the things I said about. It says 45 degrees below zero, blowing 35 mile an hour winds. They actually went up to gusts for 50. And during the search that they called off after 6 days or so, the wind speed was much faster and the temperature was worse. It was 70 degrees below zero. This is the scientist missing from Byrd Station, presumed dead, along with other versions of it. They fired flares. They did everything they could to find him. This is a minute-by-minute account of what they did from their logbooks. May 9th, I did another search. Mile wide by 9 mile long area running south of the skiway, or skiway, excuse me. They went everywhere they could looking for anything they could, and they made it wider, like we're talking 1 mile wide by 9 mile long. They had about 200 people that could gather together total. So they put them to work, and they just literally linked up with cordage trying to find him. But this is after a blizzard. He was probably buried like under the snow, and they probably walked right past him. That happens all the time. Ask people who do search and rescue on skis and at ski resorts. You can go to a ski resort and die and not be found until spring. There is no spring in the South Pole. This is from the same article here, or from the same work. Here's the list of people. There were 220 at McMurdo. Byrd Station had 27. S Pole had 21. Eights had 11. And Palmer had 9. As of, this is from April. That's a pretty typical thing. Over here we have the field investigators and operational area. For each of them, here he is listed. National Bureau of Standards, Byrd. This is for forward scatter observations in the Antarctic, basically listening to noisy radio signals to be able to figure out some new useful information for it. So, he was 26 years old. No, that's not experienced. He had done it 25 times, and that may have made him a little overconfident. And I can tell you from my literal personal experience, getting lost in a blizzard, trying to use a handline, that walking 3 feet away from it, you can't see it. And unless the wind stops pumping at you, you can't find it. And I was advised of only one thing. Stop immediately on the ground, and every minute and a half or every 5 minutes, scream help until someone comes there. Because the minute you start walking, you will never go in the right direction. Because there's only one right direction, and there's 359 wrong ones. You will get lost, and you will never be found again. I was told that was drilled into my head 100 times. And the 1 or 2 times I've had to do search and rescue, just a little bit of help that I could offer, which is not much, I was thankful it wasn't in the middle of a blizzard. Until it was, in which case I was utterly useless because it was a whiteout and we all had to go home. So no, I don't think at the South Pole this would be a situation where this kind of thing happening is mysterious in any way. And I consider it disrespectful of the dead to keep making them into some sort of subject matter for people to use for books and movies and spooky stories on the internet. Just saying. So yeah, this person experienced exactly what would happen to most people. The majority of people, you included, this would happen to. That's why the majority of us should not go to the South Pole or any other place where this kind of thing can happen. It's also why I don't think people should climb Mount Everest. But anyway, that's just me. And look at how many expert climbers are buried up there because they weren't able to remove them. So those are the conditions, and that's how big the surface area is. And I'd like to point out, years later, there is still something under there that's still actively in use, apparently. But nobody even includes photos from it on Google Maps, the Google Street View kind of photos. So yeah, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. It's not a mystery. This is pretty much what would be expected to happen in the 60s.